Hi there. I know you're very keen. That's Plopsy Demargue there in the background on Sid's image. She's the lead singer in a band called Fancy Aspirin. A lot has been happening in the world of Bob Dylan. I'm Sean Hewitt. This is Sid Smith, my associate and the real Dylan fan of our duo. I don't know if you look at a website, Sid, called Super Deluxe Edition. It's it's a site that believes in holding the music in your hands, physical media, and they've done a series of Blu-rays recently, and they've now reached number 8, and there's more coming very shortly, of their series of surround sound Blu-rays of big albums. And this is the latest one they've released. I don't know if you've seen it. It's there recently was a bootleg series, volume 17 was Fragments, which is based on the Time Out of Mind sessions. There's a new mix of Time Out of Mind in that box set, and this is the Dolby Atmos mix, and it comes complete also with a high definition, higher resolution stereo version on this as well. That's the slipcase, and if you just push that up, that's the cover of Fragments, the picture from the cover of Fragments. That's the cover of Time Out of Mind itself, and that comes in a disc with the familiar audio sonic style oldie worldy label from the album, and a booklet with one of the essays from the box set booklet in it. So quite decent actually, and this does sound great. It folds down to my 5.1 system very well, and it's there's a few more left on the site, but they've only pressed 5,000 of these. So if you want to get one, your time's running out. The album has re-entered the charts because of that release, which just shows you how few albums it takes to get into the charts nowadays.
Yeah.
Right. Well, last time we met, Sid, we convened here to give our awe-inspiring verdict on the magnificent album Together Through Life, which I think we both agree in each of our cases is one of our top albums of all time. Since that album came out, we're now in 2009, 2010. A few more things have happened in Bob world. In particular, the day August the 19th, 2010 was a big date for Bob because we had a lot of things happening at once. I think, at least digitally, this album came out on that day. It was released later the following year on CD, but I think on October the 19th, 2010, this became available digitally. And this is the album we're going to be discussing today, which is Bob Dylan in concert at Brandeis University in 1963. That's the CD. I'll show you the LP in a minute. But a lot of other things came out that day. The bootleg series, well, now volume 9. This is very historically interesting. This is a double CD, and this is the Whitmark demos. This is the very young Bob Dylan, and there's all these demos on here of many songs which became legendary and many songs which faded into obscurity. But these are his very first recordings of a lot of these songs, and sometimes he sounds interested, sometimes he doesn't. And as usual, there's an excellent, quite thick booklet to go with this, and again, a very interesting missing bit of the story that nobody knew about. Also on that date, they released this box set, which is the first 8 albums in mono on CD. This is from an era when there are often mono and stereo mixes, of course, of albums, as we know from the Beatles. This is quite a nice set with all the albums reproduced authentically with all the original inserts and in card sleeves from the first album right up to Blonde on Blonde and John Wesley Harding. And again, another hefty booklet in there. For those of you who don't want to shell out for that, and I can understand it, though I really enjoyed listening to these records in vinyl. In many cases, how they were, look at there, a cheeky picture of Bob on the back there. They're often intended to be heard like this, of course, the early stuff. For those of you who don't want to flash out, there's a single disc compilation of this, and typically it includes a track. I think it's Positively 4th Street, which was released as a single that isn't on any of the mono CDs in that box. So you have to get this one as well to get the full mono spread of. It's a nice set to play when you haven't got time to listen to an entire album. But as I say, on this date as well, it was a big day for Bob fans. A lot of stuff to listen to. Around the same time, though not on exactly the same date, a studio album came out that isn't on the series we're discussing, where Idiot Wind, the Dylan Vinyl, the Definitive Collection, and some of the studio albums aren't in. We've not had Knocked Out Loaded, for example, but we've not had this either, which is the Christmas in the Heart, which comes out in 2008, basically. This is 2008, 2010, I think. I'm not sure. I don't know. There was lovely Christmas pictures in this. Bob, this is a charity record. Bob went in with his band and quite elaborate setup of people and recorded an enormous number of Christmas songs. And in Britain, all the money from this goes to Crisis, the housing charity, and there's a similar homeless charity in America that gets all the proceeds from this. People have got different views on this. I know you've probably got it's a Columbia, let me see this, Christmas recording. I think this is lovely, and I think it should be in the set, really. If you want to buy this on vinyl, it's about £100. That's how rare it is. But anyway, he's not been idle. So, but as I said last time, we're going back into our TARDIS. This album is Bob just before he becomes famous. This isn't a complete tape of the concert, I don't think. It's about 38 minutes long, this. So that immediately goes into your, this is a great Bob album file, I'm sure. It's recorded on May the 10th, 1963, in Brandeis University, Waltham, Massachusetts. And this was out in October 2010 on digital. It was mastered in December 2010 and released, I think, the following April on CD and vinyl. And it's got sleeve notes on the back by Michael Gray, who's one of the great self-proclaimed Dylan experts. He was the author of the Bob Dylan Encyclopedia. He literally wrote the book on him. And he says, this is the last live performance we have for Bob Dylan before he becomes a star. Within weeks, Freewheeling is issued. Peter, Paul and Mary released their Blowing in the Wind, which sells 2 million copies. And in late July, Dylan arrives at the Newport Folk Festival as a newcomer and leaves it as its stellar success. A month later comes the March on Washington, where, of course, Bob appeared with Martin Luther King when he gave the I Have a Dream speech. Everything seems transcendent with hope, warmed by communal consensus and the politics of change. That November, President Kennedy is assassinated. Dylan's political certainties unravel. He expands his gloriously long exploration of the possibilities of song. So those are quite nice notes, and he goes through every track in order on there. So, and there's a lovely picture of him at the actual gig. This is the young, carefree Bob, I think. The way they perform this is in this Audio Sonic, as usual. Lovely old-fashioned label there, and this is a lovely pressing again with a polyline sleeve. I think it's a lovely listen, this, and I particularly like side one, where we start off with an incomplete song, Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance. We get Talking John, Birch Power and I Blues, which is like a joke song, really. Then we get the Ballad of Hollis Brown, anything but a joke song, and then we get a very powerful Masters of War. On the second side, we get, it's mainly this talking blues style he's got with his comical things, Talking World War III Blues, Bob Dylan's Dream, Talking Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues. I think overall, I think it could be fair to say it's more of historical, the musical interest as an album, but I think side one in particular gives an idea of how he sounded in these important formative days and how he was going down with audiences. There's a very happy atmosphere about this, and I think it's rather refreshing to hear, particularly after the down in the dumps mood I was left in by Together Through Life. As ever, we've got a very detailed magazine, and they've included some great pictures, obviously. Instead of the snapshot we usually have of, I'll just show you this again, the back cover. You've got a series of photos, 3 photos of Bob and Michael Gray's very concise but very detailed notes. So the snapshot, what they're going to come from with this is, well, we've got the cover of the album, the same 3 photos, and the complete notes by Michael Gray. A really useful appendix to what we've got on the album cover there. Literally nothing you couldn't get on the cover of the album they've sent you, which was provided by Columbia, basically. And then we've got the inside, and it's one of these very useful track guides, which tell you, of course, who plays what. And on every single track, it says vocals, guitar, harmonica, Bob Dylan. every single track. You never would have guessed it. Thank God this guide is available to steer us through the morass of the personnel maze of Bob Dylan in concert, Brandeis University, 1963. What did you think of this one, Sid?
I think I'd not heard it before. I think any lost or rediscovered audio of an artist at an early point in their career, I think that's always going to be interesting, and because we know what happened.
Yeah. We know the end of the story. Yeah.
Nobody in the audience that night, not even Bob, knew what was going to happen. So there's no weight of history on them. There's no kind of weight of expectation. And in that sense, I think performances always always have a certain freedom to them. And so I enjoyed it from that perspective. I enjoyed hearing. It was kind of like eavesdropping on a moment in time. And as you say, it reminds us. I mean, I think there are other albums which do this job reasonably effectively, but of course, those live albums, he's then famous, whereas this one, he's kind of he's got a great rapport with the crowd. I mean, you can almost hear the crowd. They're really signed in. They're really willing him on as he goes through his the Talking John Birch Blues is particularly memorable, I think. Where he does these one-liners at the end, these little sign-offs, and everybody dutifully falls off the chair laughing. And I mean, sometimes with when I listen to the radio and they have on like old programs from the old comedy programs from the 1950s or the 1940s, with some they're still very funny and they transcend the time. Others are very heavily located in the time that they were recorded.
Yeah.
And you don't quite get the jokes anymore because but so there's a little bit of that goes on with I think with this recording, but John Birch Talking Blues, I mean, those people are still here, and the only difference is they're running governments now.
Yes, they are.
And that's what makes I suppose when I was listening to it, I was thinking, yeah, that's those are the people. And I particularly liked the way, I can't remember which album this is from, because it's on a studio album, isn't it? Yeah, it is. I thought I'd remembered that. I knew I'd heard it before. But it's great the way the song anticipates internet sleuthing and people who do research. It's interesting that, you know, there's on the internet, you know, about vaccinations and all the rest of it, all the kind of nut jobs who've done their research. And these are precisely the words that Bob's using about, you know, he's done his research, you know, and he's looking for the reds everywhere, and it's interesting that kind of frame of mind was a thing then as it is now. The only difference is that those nut jobs back then, you know, weren't pulling the levers of power and had no particular outlet. If you wanted to meet these people from the John Birch Society and the anti-communists, in certain parts of America, you wouldn't have had to go very far. But for most people, you wouldn't come across these people that often.
No.
Whereas, as I say, these days, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Thanks to the internet.
For our perspective, and this is like literally, it's 60 years ago. This is 60 years ago. This year, isn't it?
Yeah.
It seems kind of innocent.
Yeah,
and that you can safely take the piss.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be a lot more dangerous to do that song now.
Well, I think I mean, it's one of the songs, to be fair to Dylan. It's one of the songs. It's an unlikely song of the ages, but it is. It works. There's almost no lyric in it that worked in 1963 that wouldn't work in 2023.
Yeah. I must just have a slight correction here. He did record that song for the Freewheeling Bob Dylan, but the record company wouldn't put it out. So I am wrong about that. And his response to that, he replaced it with, he wrote some more songs and replaced it, but he deliberately went on the Ed Sullivan Show and played it live on a, played it live on telly, I think. So
I wonder where I've heard it before. Then I must.
Yeah, I mean, when you just said, I mean, I should know this, but that was a controversial song even then. So he played it live very often. It might be on another live album. Have we done a live album with that period before? I don't think we have we?
I think the other side about the album and why it works is, I mean, you do have that concentrated burst, and as you see, you get very, you get a jokey tone in some of the material, but other songs, as you've already pointed out, show you why Dylan was a compelling live performer. This is a guy, as young as he is, he knows how to work a room, and his vocal. I mean, I think his vocals on it are really good, and have a bit of fire to it, and a bit of. But it's sometimes he sounds like a missile coming in to land. Kind of. And that sort of energy in the performances across it's a short album, but it's a short recording rather, and probably obviously never intended to be an album, but here it is. And in that sense, I think it's a worthy addition. It tells us a little bit more, for casual fans like me. I mean, for someone like yourself with all the multiple bootleg and live numbers available to you, which I would never dream of getting. Something like this is quite a useful indicator as to, if you want to know what Bob Dylan was doing in 1963. This is a reasonable, to my uneducated ears. This seems like a reasonable pit stop to have a listen.
Yes, it's a nice listen, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, how sort of standard a set list is it? Is it what he was doing at the time?
That's a very good question. I presume it is a standard set list. So they're just called. Let's have a look what it says and what Michael Gray says. he makes a point that he plays nothing from his first album at all and on this short set. So he doesn't even play A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, which has already been released. He doesn't play Blowing in the Wind.
Although this is a fragment, isn't it? It's not the full concert.
I think so. Because it's so 38 minutes. It's I'll just read it. It says it's a performance like his folk club sets of the period, repertoire from an ordinary working day and very much of its time. He's low on the bill, at the opening day of the Brandeis University Folk Festival.
Okay.
The weekend stars are Gene Redpath, Gene Ritchie, and Pete Seeger.
Mhm.
Bob is 21. His debut album was released 14 months earlier, commercial flop. So it might be this might be his full set. I might be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got the John Birch Talking Paranoid Blues completely wrong. The first of 3 Talking Blues tonight mocks America's phonetic anti-communists. Bob published it in the launch issue of Broadside magazine back in February 1962. He's recorded it and performed it before. It goes down well tonight, but 2 days later, Bob will turn up at the TV studio for his big slot on the Ed Sullivan Show and walk out when the studio won't let him perform it. Oh, so Ballad of Hollis Brown, Masters of War, which is a great song. And within weeks, he's a star after this.
Yeah.
But it is unusual. It's the last innocent sight we have of Bob on record, I think.
And he's got the juice, though. He's got that kind of momentum.
He's obviously ruthlessly ambitious at this stage, but he's also very good at playing these gigs. He's him and his guitar. That's all it is. And he goes in and he makes them laugh and he makes them listen. And he does serious stuff and frivolous stuff. It's an all-round entertainment experience.
I think I mean I don't know enough about the folk music milieu that Dylan was still a part of at that point, but it kind of as a performer he does have this kind of wiry presence, and where obviously as I say, we know how it all worked out. But even accepting that the audience back then, didn't know how it was going to work out, he still has a charge to him,
Yeah, definitely.
To the performance, and it's, I mean, I don't know how much of it is hindsight and what have you, but for me, listening to it fresh, it made me sit up and listen. That's the thing. I was actually listening to it. Sometimes I struggle, as we've talked ad infinitum, I sometimes struggle to be able to listen to partly because the music doesn't carry me anyway. And what's interesting about this is I forget which number it is now. He finishes one number and goes into the next number, and musically it's almost the same chords and it's almost the same, but that kind of, in a way, doesn't matter. There's a real there's a percussive nature to his playing, which is quite I wouldn't use the word frenzied. It's not frenzied, but there's a franticness to it. There's an urgency to the way he hits the guitar. And there's an urgency in how he's projecting it, and for me that has all the qualities that I do like in Bob Dylan. Even if I don't always necessarily like the music, I'd rather listen to this era Bob Dylan than some of the later work, or indeed most of the later work, but for those reasons, because it sounds like an artist who's energized, who's engaged, who really has something to say. And it's the complete opposite to the album we were discussing in the previous episode, where I forget the name of it now.
Together Through Life.
Yeah. which just had nothing that needed to be said. It seems to me that everything on this album, even the slightly jokey nature of some of the talk and blues things, everything on it needs to be said.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to say it now. Yeah.
And importantly, needs to be heard. The people listening to the music want to hear it because it's saying something, it's describing something about their life, their time. And that's why, you know, obviously I completely respect Dylan's position as somebody who was chronicling the world in which he lived in, and responded to it in a variety of ways through a variety of songs, some of which are just brilliant songs. This album doesn't necessarily have all the weight of some of the other material that you would later record, but it's got enough in it. And you said it was 38 minutes.
I think it's 38 minutes long.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just zipped through. I wasn't aware of sitting for 38 minutes through the thing. It was just kind of bam. And so for me, big thumbs up, you know.
Good. What was your favourite track?
I think in one sense it would be the John Birch Talking Blues thing for all the reasons that I sort of enumerated earlier. But I quite like I mean, the Ballad of Hollis Brown. You know, not the cheeriest of songs.
Not one of his comedy numbers.
But in terms of which album was Hollis Brown? What studio?
I always get mixed up, and this is going to make me look.
Is it off the first one or is it off the Freewheeling? Sorry, I should have. It doesn't matter.
Well, same here. It's actually not on Freewheeling or his first album. It's on The Times They Were Changing.
Okay, right. Okay.
So he saves that for his third album. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that would be the one track off this that I would probably choose.
I also like the Vernon, but I like the very oddly titled final track, Talking Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues, because it seems it's something that's just happened in the news, and he's written this song about it, and they all know what he's talking about. I have absolutely no idea, really. I've read about it ages ago and promptly forgotten it. The picnic went wrong or was cancelled or something. But it seems to be going down very well. So in terms of the documentary feel of this album and the capturing a moment that's lost to us, as people who weren't there and don't remember the events, I think that's a good example of it. I think Masters of War is my favourite song on the album. I think he does a very good version of that. And so that's my musical favourite, rather than my documentary favourite, if you like. So I think overall, I after playing, as you say, Together Through Life, an album I don't play very often, putting this on, another album I don't really play very often, shamefully, it was like a breath of fresh air, this album. It was like it really was. This is why, you suddenly realise, this is why he's listening to, and the other one isn't. It's why he's the other. If these two albums are an interesting pair, I think, coming in this delivery with the magazine. One's an album here that demonstrates some of the qualities that make him an essential person to know something about, and one is a summation of the qualities that sometimes make him not worth knowing about. And
absolutely,
I think Together Through Life is a laughably inadequate album, and it's the worst moment in his post 97 comeback period. Every other album has something I can defend about it, and I just think it's a bland mess. Whereas this is the opposite end of the spectrum. This is electrically charged, man on the make. He's the coming man on this thing, and he's about to be enormous. He's already breaking through as a songwriter. He's about to come through as an artist in his own right. And it's fascinating to see him at that crucial turning point.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of the two albums couldn't be the contrast between the two albums couldn't be starker. On the one hand, you've got with this album, here's somebody who's wide awake, and on the previous album we were discussing, Together Through Life, here's somebody who's absolutely fast asleep, and oblivious to it all. So, what's the next in the series? Does it time hop again?
No, we return to the time track that we've been following mainly throughout the series of the chronological progress through the life of Bob. And the next album is the next proper studio album, if you discount Christmas in the Heart, which I don't. It's the album Tempest.